Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of BIM After Dark Live. My little man, Jacob, decided he wanted to say hi to the world. You want to say hi to the world, bud? Maybe? He's used to seeing other people with all the Zoom and Teams meetings we have going on. So I think he's a little bit confused as to why we're talking to a camera and no one's talking back, huh, bud? Do you see yourself over there? Look, who's that? Who's that right there? Is that Jacob? All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This is episode 15, believe it or not. That means we've been stuck, or at least I've been stuck here in my office / spare bedroom for 15 weeks now since the quarantine began, which is pretty wild. This is your weekly happy hour style live stream. So if you don't, make sure you grab yourself a cocktail and join me. Tonight's going to be pretty fun. If it's your first time here, thanks for joining. My name is Jeff, by the way, also known as the Revit Kid. If it is your first time here, make sure you subscribe. Oh, Jakey, it's blocking you. Look, it's clicking your head. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check out therevitkid.com. You can subscribe to my mailing list. Somebody asked on the chat already that how can they find out when the next ones are going to be. Oh, trying not to hit the keyboard, bud. And your best bet is to subscribe here on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at TheRevitKid, or make sure you subscribe to the mailing list on the blog at TheRevitKid.com. So with that, I think, Jakey, it's time for your milk. Okay, bud? And we're going to get rolling into some content. What do you say? All right, Mommy's got your milk. Go ahead. Say bye to everybody. Say bye. Bye. All right. Cool. So that's my son, Jacob. He's 20 months old now, about to be 21 months old. And I have to say, yes, he is the real Revit Kid. I do have to say that one of the nice things about working from home so much because of what's going on in the world is being able to hang out with him as much as I want. And he's in that stage where, I mean, he's going, every day is a new word, every day is a new thing. So I guess in some ways I'm kind of a little blessed that I get to stay home and see all that, which is pretty awesome. So that's my buddy Jacob. Okay, so as I mentioned, make sure you subscribe below. Today's gonna be kind of cool, laid back, relaxed, but also some cool content. So the sort of what kind of made me focus in on this are two things. And what I mean by this is talking about making sexier, so better looking Revit views and presentations and sort of graphics in general. And there's two reasons why I thought this was a good timing for it. So in my previous sessions, different things we talked about: Twinmotion, Enscape, Photoshop, all kinds of cool things. And I always got some questions about some of the graphical settings that I used. So like someone would see a 3D view, for example, and they would ask me, how did I create that 3D view, for example. Actually, I should probably tilt this up a little since Jacob's not here anymore. And stuff like that. So I wanted to sort of run through some of that, and then also I did a session, a similar type of sessions presentation a couple weeks ago for AIA Connecticut, and I felt bad because I posted it on the blog, and I thought it was all AIA members can get in for free, and it turned out it was only AIA Connecticut members that were in the database that they use, and so I know there's a bunch of you out there who emailed me and couldn't get in, and we're a little bummed about that, so I apologize. So this is actually sort of a presentation / question and answer session based on that presentation because I felt bad. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into some of the content. I actually have a bunch of prepared content for this because I think it's important to run through the steps as they are. But I am going to be keeping an eye on the chat, so I want you guys to ask questions as we go along, converse. The best part about this being a live session is that we can chat in between. And so with that, I think I'm going to jump into the 4 steps to Sexier Revit. So thanks again for joining me. Let me flip over here. All right. So my little floating head there, if I move around, it's just because I'm blocking some important content. But for now, I'll keep myself down in the corner, and we're going to run through some cool things. So just to run through what we're going to talk about a little bit in this session. And again, I have a presentation here. It is laid out, but I urge you guys to ask questions in between. I can flip out and do demonstrations and all kinds of good stuff in between. So don't let that fool you. I just wanted to make sure I prepared the content, and there's some really, really cool slides in here, so I really wanted to show them. So first I'm going to talk about my journey. One of the more important things I think in general, not just with presentation, but with Revit itself, is to show people that myself and the gurus out there and those of us who are teaching Revit, we all started where you are today. If you're a beginner, if you're intermediate, whatever, right? We've all been there before. And so I think it's really important to show, whether it's through examples or stories, some of the where I was and how it can relate to you, because I think it makes it obtainable, the level of knowledge or experience that myself and others have in Revit. It makes it obtainable for other people, and it's not like this pie in the sky goal. We all started on the same playing field. So Rich just asked if it's being recorded. Yes, it is. All these live streams are recorded. They'll be live on the YouTube channel right after we're done, or they'll be accessible on the YouTube channel, and I also post them on the blog. If you want to see any previous ones, just go to live.bimafterdark.com, and that'll bring you to the page on the blog where there's all the 14 plus even some previous happy hour sessions before that episode. So definitely. So I think it's important for you guys to see that I've been there before, and that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, basically. Then I also want to talk a little bit about why I think it's important to focus a little bit on making your graphics better. Some of my sort of goals when it comes to BIM and Revit and the future of this industry. So then we're going to go through the 4 steps. And step 1 is adding depth and shading. So we're going to go through, this is elevation sections, floor plans, 3D views, diagrams, you name it. There's a couple really, really simple little things that you can do to improve those, and they're not big, right? And the whole point of this presentation, by the way, is I wanted 4 steps. Obviously, we can go on for hours and hours, but I wanted 4 steps that will immediately impact your Revit presentations and your presentation graphics. So step 2 is using custom materials. So we'll run through a little bit of that. Step 3 is always post-process your renderings, and I'll show you a really cool, quick, simple way to post-process. It does not have to take forever, and I will also reference some other content that I have in relation to the post-processing process. And then last but not least, real-time rendering for the win. And so if you followed me for even if it's just for the last 6 months, you know that I'm a big fan of all of the real-time rendering programs, from Twinmotion to Lumion to Enscape to Unreal to, you go down the list. And so I want to just show some examples and explain why I think if your goal is to make Revit renderings, presentations, etc., you have to look into real-time rendering software. So with that, I want to jump right into my journey, but if you give me 1 second, I'm just going to close the door because I could hear it getting loud out there. Alright, sorry. It's bath time now for Jacob, so he tends to get a little wild sometimes when it's bedtime. He's at that age where chasing him around the house is fun for him at 7:30 and 8 o'clock at night. Alright then. So I want to talk a little bit about my journey, because I think it's fun to see other people. It's fun for me always to look back at one of my first and second Revit projects and presentations and so on. And so I also think it's valuable for you to see that we all start in the same spot, right? Everyone starts in the same place. Maybe it was 10 or 11 years ago for me, but either way, I remember I was there and we all started in the same place. Oops, hit the wrong button there. Okay. Alright, so my head is blocking some of the slide, but that's okay. Maybe I'll make it a little bit smaller so you can see a little better. There we go. Tuning in from Ontario. What's up, Jeff Davis? Cool, man. Canada. Always fun. Always a fun place to be in Canada. Okay, so here we go. What you see here are a few select projects from when I started learning Revit. So believe it or not, the one all the way on the left-hand side of your screen, which is labeled 2008, that was my very first Revit project for a recycling center at Norwalk Community College. So 12 years ago, or 20, I don't even know what that is, 12 years ago. It's 2020. So 12 years ago. And what's interesting about this project is not necessarily the renderings. So what you'll notice is that there's a ton of renderings. In 2008, for those of you who are familiar, that's when Revit finally had a built-in ray tracer. So it finally actually had a rendering engine built into it. Before this, I was still using AutoCAD to create plans, sections, and elevations, and 3D Max or SketchUp to create 3D models, and then some sort of plugin to render them. The fact that Revit had a built-in rendering engine now was what made me say, oh my goodness, maybe I should try this program. I'm in school, I'm designing things, and I need to make plans, sections, elevations, and renderings. I can do it all in one program. This is phenomenal. And so unfortunately, this was the first project I tried to do it in. And as you can see, the quality is actually not all that bad. I clearly did a bunch of renderings, so I was so pumped about the fact that it rendered. But one story I like to tell about this, which has nothing to do with presentation graphics, is if you notice, it's a recycling center, and there's these crazy crumbled up paper looking roofs. And so those are all roof by profile or extrusion, roof by extrusion. And then you'll notice there's a whole bunch of curtain walls. It's glass, right? So this is, you're not going to believe it when I tell you, but when I came from using SketchUp or 3D Max to make my actual 3D elements. So guess what I did for all of those curtain walls? That's right. I modeled them in place. I used magenta lines, trimmed, split, trim, extruded, and then make glass on the inside. And I'll never forget, I think it was at the end of that semester, or maybe the summer after, or maybe even during that semester, whenever I finished this project, my boss and I at the time were learning Revit together. And we discovered the attach to roof tool. And my mind exploded because I had no idea that you could just take curtain walls and attach them to a roof and they just follow the surface and you don't have to do any trimming and stuff. So pretty funny. So that's 2008. And then as you see in 2009 and 2010, a couple different things. There's some residential projects that I did in the middle there. I started to play around with construction documents, and you could see I was throwing some renderings and images in there. Then in 2010, now I'm at the University of Hartford in my undergraduate program, and you could see I started really getting heavy duty into the detail of the interiors, and this is what I like to call getting BIM crazy. And so I think we've all been there before. You start to realize that the more you model, the better everything looks and the easier all the drawings become. And then you find out that you're modeling everything. You start modeling freaking bolts and hangers and all kinds of stuff. And you know, I think there's a wave of how you learn Revit, and that's part of it. It's kind of figuring things out, smashing things, breaking things, getting frustrated. Then you start modeling everything from the nail and the wood to the hanger, and then you start to find a balance between everything. So that's what I like to call my BIM crazy moment. But you could see, as far as the presentation techniques are concerned, I started playing with the idea of these 2D views and how I can make them look better as these orthographic views. And you can see even the floor plane here where my little head is on the bottom, which is 2010. I started introducing shading and the last one is 2010. I'm sorry, my head is blocking it. There we go. I'll move my little head there. So that's 2010. So this is I tried to pick one project a year essentially, which is what you're going to see coming up. And so you'll notice I started putting shading in the floor plans. I started doing just a couple less views. One thing with Revit, as you go through it, is you tend to make more views. I'm going to hide my head for a moment just so you guys can see this. I'm just going to show the screen. Perfect. So now it's 2011, 12, and 13. So these are all school projects at the University of Hartford. These are all undergrad projects, and then I think 13 was grad school. And you could see it's kind of cool on the left-hand side. I started playing around with coloring the floor plans, shading the walls, so poching with shadows. The floor plans start getting a little nicer, a little better looking. And then obviously I started learning Photoshop, so the rendering started coming together a little better. I was trying to superimpose renderings onto images and so on and so forth. This is a spiritual center that I did in Hartford. 2012, this was actually a snippet from a project where we had to kind of make a magazine out of our project. But what I thought was kind of cool about that is I went through like an architectural record and I started looking at the style of how they presented projects and started playing with that. And I created, this is when I actually came up with the 70-50-20 rule, which I'm going to show you guys tonight, which is the setting I make for what I call architectural record plans, which is what you see here. It's the dark poche, light light background lines, nice shading, and then using numbers and stuff like that for the room. So, and then on the right hand side in 2013, this was a master planning project. I started playing with shaded views and different ways to mess with phasing and how you can show that. You can see the topography is dark where it's not new, and it's got this sort of more vibrant. So PowerPoint, but I'm actually in the streaming program. So sorry. There we go. Now 2014 and 15, these are my senior thesis, or my graduate thesis and residential work kind of starting to come into play. What you'll see in 2014 is this is actually my thesis project, which actually might have been 13. I don't know why I put 14 here, but either way, you can see this was actually when I started looking into really focusing on rendering, and I actually taught myself 3D Max and V-Ray from Revit model. So the process from Revit to 3D Max to V-Ray, really just to understand what is so special about V-Ray, and sort of try to get a sense of, can I recreate those things in Revit? And so what's really cool is the one on the left-hand side in 2014, those the top one is actually both of those are V-Ray renderings in 3D Max. But then the one in the middle here, the house, the Rocky Mountain house, that's actually Revit. So what you'll see is I took what I learned in V-Ray and I tried my best to apply it to Revit in the post-processing process and so on and so forth. And you could also see in the middle here, there's the Rocky Mountain house, 2015. The plans started getting really, really nice. I started playing with exploded axons, which I have a ton of videos on in the channel and on my website if you want to look at it, section perspectives, etc. 2016, some of the residential work that I've done. You can see I'm playing with some different filters in post-processing. I'm still using the same shading effects in Revit, but now afterwards I might be running them through some sketchy filters and some different things to add a little depth. The renderings here are actually done in Lumion, so I'm starting to now play with real-time rendering. Now 17, 18, another one in 18. This is when I think the tables turned a little bit for me as far as presentation, and I thought they started really coming to the next level. Partly with the help of Lumion. So most of actually all the renderings on this page, the renderings are Lumion, all the orthographic, including the diagram, those are all Revit views. But you can see I'm starting to play with different filters. I'm starting to play, the Lumion, one of the nice things about it is you're not photoshopping stuff anymore. You're just doing post-processing, so you can spend more time on making the scenes and the images look great. The tower on the right is kind of cool. There's some techniques that I use there to show it look like. But again, all of these are modeled completely in Revit and rendered in Lumion. So starting to learn there. And here's that same house that I showed in 2016, just to give you a sense of where this is actually a photo, and then this is sort of a rendering of that same project superimposed in a photo. This is a Lumion rendering. So I think you can see how the journey went from, just learning how to render things to learning different aspects of rendering to learning Photoshop and post-processing, to tying it all together, bringing it back to Revit, then coming out to Lumion. And I think it's just kind of cool to see that where I came from and where I took all these skills and why it's important to look back on those things, but also to show you that the progression of what I've done is something anyone can achieve. And then of course just some of the more recent things. Some of you guys have seen these images and videos in other presentations where I talked about construction. So I've taken those same skills and applied them now to construction visuals and communication on the execution of jobs. And again, using Lumion, using different techniques, and of course into videos. You guys have seen some of the cool video stuff that I've done. So I guess I can bring myself back so you're not staring at a screen anymore. Hey! So pretty cool, I think. I hope that was helpful for you guys to see that journey. For me, it's always fun to look back and see the progression. It's always nice, and you should do this for yourself too, is when you can start seeing and realizing that you make progress, because when you're in the tunnel and charging ahead, you tend to not look back. But I want you to sort of see that progression. That's my journey from 2008 till now. So now I'm checking out the chat, so if you have any questions, just remember, just jump in the chat there, and I will see it, I'll answer it, or try to. So now let's talk about why I think this is important. Why do you guys may have noticed if you followed me for any amount of time that I do focus on making things better. I am an architect, so I guess graphics and design are always front of mind, but I am a big fan of good graphic design, and I am a big fan of presenting things well graphically. And I think in the BIM realm, there's sort of split into it's like left brain, right brain, which is a good thing. And there's a lot of folks that are the practical BIM engineers type, and may not care or have that sense of design, and most of them will admit that they don't. But then there's the other side of it where it's like, yeah, this is all great practical stuff, but we also need it to look good. And so I'm kind of in between. But why do I think it's really important now, especially? And I did it again. Look at that. I gotta stop clicking off of the streaming program on you guys. So as you guys know, I've spent the last 5 years working full-time with Turner Construction as their VDC manager, and as well as doing residential stuff on the side. So spent the first 10 years of my working experience as an architect, working with architects in architecture firms, and now I've been spending some time on the construction side. And part of that was to learn things, right? I wanted to learn every aspect of the industry. And one thing I learned is that it's really hard to read architectural drawings when you're not the one who made them. And so when I think about presentation and techniques, and a lot of what I do on a daily basis for Turner is actually it's communicating the architect's intent using 3D in graphics and design, right? Working with the architect to better communicate it. So I like to think about these because I'm sure everyone out there has built an IKEA desk, right? I mean, I have. I'm sure everyone out there has, or a dresser. I like to put the drawers up here as to the instructions, because anyone who's built an IKEA piece of furniture knows that the drawers, they're not hard to put together, but when you have like 12 of them, it's a freaking nightmare. But one thing you want to notice here is that there's no plans, there's no sections, there's no elevations. There's just 3 axonometric or isometric, I guess, views, and you know exactly what you're supposed to do, right? And then you start thinking about, well, think about Legos, right? I have a now 5-year-old nephew who is 4, he just turned 5, and he's been putting Legos together. He's 4 years old. Think about that. If you can build this airplane here without a single note, keynote, legend, floor plan, elevation, then why do we overcomplicate the process? And I understand why construction documents are. I don't want to go down that road, but I want you to just think about, how can I simplify, right? So this is how we build a plane out of Legos, right? But then this is how we build a $32 million, 80,000 square foot school, right? And this is how we tell them how it's elevated, okay? So my whole thing with making presentation and graphics look better is not necessarily just looking sexy, right? And obviously you want things to look better. In my opinion, people pay attention more when things look better. But you also want your intent to be understood, right? And so, yeah, these are fine elevations, but and these are my elevations. I'll take full responsibility. This is a project that I designed, but these are just, we make these because we have to, right? Like, why is it, why can't we think about our projects like IKEA buildings? Let's start putting axons and diagrams and 3D views and all kinds of stuff in our documents. Let's put them in the drawings, right? Remember, we have a 3D model. So my hope. Oh wait, I missed something here. Sorry, guys. There we go. I forgot about the Allen key and the little safety man. But to be honest, like, you start looking at these images and breaking down structure and walls and pulling axons and all this crazy stuff. I mean, this makes sense, right? You don't have to. Yeah, maybe there are reasons for floor plan sections, elevations. I understand that. But start breaking out of the box and using some of the techniques and thinking cleverly about how to best portray your design intent to the person building it. Okay, as I mentioned, I spent a lot of time portraying design intent to my team because a lot of it gets lost in the sauce, right? Whether it's just visually having them access the models or making diagrams that explain the model, right? And so I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of contracts. So if I see any comments about contracts, I won't do that. But I do want you guys to think about it. This is why I think it's important to think not just in terms of producing construction documents, but think about how can you change that process? How can you use these tools and techniques and all this great stuff we have to do that? So I see a bunch of chat coming in. I knew this was probably going to be an opportunity to chat. So before I jump into the steps, I'm going to read some of these. So Clay just asked, at Turner, am I getting built Revit models from architects, or are you getting 2D plans and turning them into Revit models by Turner Construction? No, we are getting Revit models as well as the 2D drawings because, of course, based on contracts, the 2D drawings own. But no, we are getting Revit models. We work hand in hand with the architects. Even though most of our projects are design bid built, we still make it, we open the communication early. We talk with the architects. We explain how we're using their models, how we plan on using them. A lot of times they're very receptive, and we're going back and forth trying to help each other for the betterment of the project. So I would say in my region, which is Connecticut and Boston, I can't think of very many projects we are not getting models from the team. Scour, hey man, how you doing? Scour's been here every week, I think. Our industry hasn't really changed. Yes, I do wish the model was the norm too. The hardest thing in drawings is to take complex and make it simple to understand. Exactly my point. Sometimes things are just really difficult to show in orthographic or two-dimension views, I should say, right? And so there's no reason why you can't draw a wall section because, in theory that may give you the best information for building it. But why can't you have a three-dimensional blow-up axon of that same wall section next to it? We're already modeling it. It doesn't take that much more effort. And now your design intent is moving forward. And somebody said that means more hours for staff and direct expense to the project. I disagree with that. I would argue that it takes a hell of a lot more time to put together that set of construction documents than it does to put together three-dimensional views that actually explain it. So I don't fully agree with that. Plus, if you're using Revit, you are already doing the modeling, and it's not that much more effort. So, and then of course, yeah. Sorry, I'm just reading some of the comments just to make sure. Architectural diagrams are must. Awesome. Cool. Well, it looks like I struck a chord with some of you, which is awesome. That's what I like to hear. And I'm a firm believer, and as an architect myself, that we should eliminate construction documents as much as possible. I'm hoping that in my lifetime we build from models and we build from 3D objects. Okay. All right. So Roberto just asked about custom materials. We'll talk about that actually in here a little bit. I'm not sure if I'll be able to answer it completely, but we'll head back to it in a second. But all right, let's see. Ryan just said putting a house together with 32 dowels impressive. I know, man. I know. And let me tell you, those dowels, when you break one, you usually don't have extras. I found myself digging out dowels all the time in those projects. Actually, Chris.Blood made a really good point before I move into the first step, is how young and old are you? I see 3D from 2D. So I guess you're asking me how old I am, which whatever. I'm going to be 32 in August. But well, you made a really good point because there's a stat and I cannot find it. If someone can find it, please post it in the chat who said it or where it came from. But I remember it being said maybe in a conference or presentation, but it's something like 2 or 3 or 5% of the population can look at a floor plan and see and understand what it means in 3 dimensions. Okay, so we're architects, engineers, contractors. We spend every day of our lives looking at plans and turning them to 3D. So we're of the probably percentage that can. Most of the population cannot. I don't necessarily think it's an age thing. I think it's just the way you're wired type of thing. So if anyone can find that, please let me know because that would be really sweet. Okay, awesome chat, guys. This is sweet. Scoured has some great points about the model and sharing 3D. Good point there. Awesome. Check out some of Scoured's comments down there. Okay, so let's get into the steps now. I did my little rant. So the first step is really adding depth and shading to your orthographic view, so to speak. So right here is a floor plan. This is probably what your floor plan looks like immediately out of the box with Revit. Okay, there's some dimensions. You can see there's these crazy room tags, which are the ones that came in with it. This is probably what you've seen on most projects right off the bat, right? This is out of the box. But then adding a couple small setting changes, this is what they can look like. So this is me applying what I call the 70-50-20 rule. I actually have not talked about the 70-50-20 rule in a public forum like this, only in my courses. So this is the first time I'm doing it, but it's something I've been doing for many, many years. And it's really simple, but it's just a way to remember some of the settings. So you'll notice, let me go before and after again. Here was before, here was after. So a few things happening here. Obviously, I'm adding post shade to the walls, turning on shadows, and then I'm changing some of the settings as far as the shadows are concerned. And then this is the architectural record style I was talking about. So I'm doing numbers instead of room names, and then some sort of a legend to the side. But here's a lovely Revit elevation. Revit elevations are probably the one thing that people look at and out of the box without touching them and think, oh my god, this program looks so ugly. Applying the 70-50-20 rule and a couple other techniques, which I have, I will post them in the links here afterwards, and they are on the blog if you just search Revit elevations on the blog or even on the channel. But you can see immediately adding some of the shading and depth changes everything, right? I mean, the difference between this and this. And I don't understand why this cannot be part of the construction document set. There's absolutely no reason why an elevation that looks like this with some notes in levels can't be part of it. So the other area you can utilize 70-50-20 rules in, and this is a Bjork-Ingles diagram. I know that off the bat. Everyone probably knows that. But diagrams are huge. And somebody mentioned diagrams for explaining your design, partie diagrams, etc., etc. You can make these in Revit. And so this is actually where I kind of got the idea of the 70-50-20 rule and trying to make it, is trying to make graphics like this, which most people would say are in Rhino or Grasshopper or Illustrator or something like that, but make them in Revit. So what you're seeing here are actually graphics that were made directly in Revit. These are image exports directly from Revit, and this is using the 70-50-20 rule. In fact, I have a tutorial on the blog and on this channel. Just look up making big BIG diagrams in Revit, and this exact example is there, but this is the 70-50-20 rule. That's it being applied. So what is the 70-50-20 rule? So here's that same project, and this is a typical default 3D view, okay? And so you'll notice it's got some different things going on. It's got jagged lines, there's no shading, there's no options. So the first thing I do is I turn on anti-aliasing. For those of you that don't know what anti-aliasing is, it's going to smooth your edges and make it look more like a vector drawing. I turn on shadows, I turn on ambient shadows, and then you'll notice in the lighting, you set your sunlight to what you need, and then right here I do 70-50-20. If you like lighter shadows, you can do 70-50-15, but sunlight at 70, ambient light at 50, and shadows at 20. Okay, so that is, Gene just asked what's my blog. My blog is therevitKid.com, so check that out. So that's the 70-50-20 rule. And you can see when you apply it to sections. Here I'm just adding poche for my fill, and and applying that. But you notice how it gives that ambient shadow, which is making shadows your ambient light that creates shadows. So corners have this nice gradient to them. Adding the shadows, using the 20 or 15 for your shadows lightens them up. By default, Revit shadows are at like 50, and they're super dark and super ugly. So I would definitely check it out. So that's the 70-50-20 rule. I go into extreme depth of it in one of my courses. By the way, I didn't mention in the beginning, but I do have four full-length courses in the BIM After Dark community, and you have access to all of them as a member. So definitely check that out at community.bimafterdark.com. And all of this stuff is super in depth. I get into the shadows, the lighting, and all that good stuff. But I wanted to show you guys the 70-50-20 rule. So right off the bat, the first thing you can do is start adding depth and shadows to use the 70-50-20 rule in your views. Pretty sweet. Before I jump out of that, somebody mentioned contractors will paint your shadows if you do that. No, that's not the case. I will tell you one thing. One thing I learned working for a contractor now for 5 or 6 years is they're not as dumb as we think as architects. So as architects, we're always looking at contractors and thinking they're, dumb nail hammer hit guys. They're actually very, very smart. So yes, things like that happen. I understand. But if you keep the 20 and make it a nice light shadow, no one's going to ask that question. Plus it looks, you can tell it's a shadow. If the elevation is rastered, I don't see why a raster can't be in the construction documents, actually. Josh just mentioned rastering image. Yes, if you put shadows on it, rasters them. But I can tell you from experience that most of your construction documents are becoming rasterized by the end users anyway. So, and if they don't print well, get a better printer. I mean, really, like laser printers. Come on. Okay. So step 2 is using custom materials. So when it comes to your renderings, the last thing you want to do is use that default red brick. Okay, you want to use custom materials. And so what I have here is a materials board for that Rocky Mountain house. And you can see on the top, these are actually the 1, 2, 3, 5 or 6 or 7. Those are actually the seamless textures that I used for it. And then the bottom is just pictures of the site. Okay, so one of the things that's going to completely change your renderings right off the bat is using the materials that you want for your design. Okay, and so here's a couple renderings of that same project. You can see there's the stone. You can see the wood material is custom. The the glass material is a little custom. This room is a great example there. The floor is a custom material. The walls are a custom material. The ceiling's a custom material. Those are all textures that were brought in. These are actually native Revit renderings. These aren't even Lumion or Twinmotion renderings. So these are custom materials that I use to make these renderings. And you can see how they immediately change the look and feel of it. If you started using all the default concrete and wood flooring in Revit, it gets bland and old right away, and it also may not go with your design. A couple more images showing everything in the scene is basically a custom material. Okay, this whole rendering. And again, these are Revit 2015 rendered native Revit. So just to give you a sense of what you can do if you needed to, and also to give you a sense of what someone just asked where those renderings made. All these renderings I'm showing you right now are native Revit renderings, and these are actually made in 2015. This one right here is Lumion, so it still applies. You want to use custom materials that will actually go with your design. So here's a museum exhibit, and you can see there's not a lot of custom materials, but there's a frosted glass, there's a concrete wall, there's concrete floor, and then there's a nice just plain white drywall sort of texture. But all of that makes the scene. That is what makes your image. If I just use a default concrete and a default floor that was in the program, they would not look the way they look here. Another few examples. Here's a residential project. This is also a Lumion rendering. And you can see the wood ceiling, the concrete floors, the wood. I'm not a huge fan of the wood table that I did there. I should probably change that one day. The wood centerpiece there. Everything in here is custom materials. And so the custom textures are massive. I mean, even here, these are some of those Enscape renderings that I'll show in a little while. And if you saw my Enscape session, I don't remember when it was, but I'll link it in the comments. Wood makes everything nice. Yes, wood is a nice warm material, right? So then the first question that people ask me is, where do you get your textures? So if you haven't checked it out yet, definitely check out my PBR, which is physically based rendered materials post on the blog. Again, if I didn't have all this crap open right now, I would link all the links here immediately for you guys. But in the description of this video on YouTube, I will put all the links I'm mentioning, and I'll also put them on the blog tomorrow when this posts. I did have a review of PBR materials in Revit, which you can use now. So I have changed some of my locations for them, but right off the bat, one of the things that I use is textures.com. So very simple. You can make a free account and download a certain number of textures a day. You can see here what I'm doing is I'm just going to textures.com and looking for stone. What's nice about this is it shows you the repeated pattern. It shows you different versions of them. And then you can download the textures directly from here. You can see there's a beautiful stone texture. Depending on the program you're using, you can also download height maps, etc., etc. So textures.com is one of them. The other one is Google. So a lot of people ask me where I get textures, and I gotta be honest with you, if I'm looking for something very specific, I might go to the manufacturer, but I also may do, as long as you say seamless and texture somewhere in your Google search, you're gonna get a lot of results from different locations. Some of them are gonna be bad, just Google, right? You gotta understand how to get through it. But some of them are good. So my two major places that I've gotten textures for over the years have been Google and textures.com. So definitely do that. And then the last part is, if you are using Revit natively, what you want to do is you want to not just use a texture, but if you don't have the normal map or any of the maps for whatever program you're using, you do want to create a bump map for it. So I do also have a video on this, which I will link after the fact, but I'm just showing you some of the ways that you can make bump maps using Photoshop. And I do have a complete lesson on that. But what I'm doing here is just trying to use the bump, there's a 3D bump thing in Photoshop, but it doesn't work really well for Revit. So all you do is make your image black and white, change the levels so you have something that's really contrasted, and basically with a texture and a bump map, you're immediately going to have a way better looking Revit rendering. If you're using Twinmotion or Lumion, you may want to look into how they use, how they create and use bump maps. With Lumion, it automatically makes a normal for you, and it does a pretty good job assuming the bumps. With Twinmotion, you need to have normal maps, reflective maps, all these crazy maps with it, which goes back to the whole PBR thing. Nico just asked if I've tried Polygon for textures. I have not. I've heard about it. I just haven't had to use it, or haven't tried using it. But so that's how you make a bump map. And Jean Paul just asked, the bump option in Revit isn't that effective. It is effective. If you create a good bump map like this, it will help, especially with any program. When using bump maps versus displacement or actual modeling things, you're gonna want to add a little reflectivity to make the bumps more visible. So it does help, and you have to have a good bump map. If you plan on bringing your model out into Lumion or Twinmotion, then you may not even need to go through this process, because making the bump map may be redundant in the program that you're going out to. But using custom textures is massive, and make sure when you're doing renderings now, don't be stuck with whatever the program gives you. Try out some custom things. It's going to change the way your presentations look. Okay, and again, that's textures.com and Google, and then I will post some links to the other tutorials that I was talking about. Sweet. I think I missed a couple little comments back there, so sorry about that, guys. I think Ryan mentioned that PDFing, so I think he's talking about shaded views. PDFing looks like garbage. You gotta mess with the settings. It'll get there, I promise you. Please distinguish materials from textures. Materials and textures are the same thing. They are synonyms. I'm just calling them material. I'm just calling them textures. Some people call them materials. Textures are actually the one part of a material, I guess you could say. All right, so then step 3. So step 1 was applying shadows, shading, and depth. Step 2 was custom materials. Step 3 is now talking about renderings again. Always post-process your renderings. So this is whether you're using Lumion, Twinmotion, Enscape, Revit Cloud, whatever, right? You never ever want to take a rendering. And I could tell you, being a juror and at plenty of students' projects, even recently, many people are just pumping out renderings, throwing them on a board, and presenting them to clients or jurors. Always do a little bit of post-processing. So here's actually the same project. This was back in 2015. And this is actually the native Revit project. Oh man, the wine's not doing it for me tonight. I'm trying out. So this was before, and this was after. So this is a little unique because I'm also putting in a background, right? Which helps. It helps with the realism. But there are a lot of things that are happening beyond just the background. And so if you're using Lumion or Twinmotion, and what you'll see in any of my tutorials and live sessions about those programs is that you don't have to Photoshop in the background for the most part. You can build your scene, right? So that's nice. So this one I actually Photoshopped in the background, but I am enhancing the colors, the vibrance, the contrast, the detail, the shadows, the highlights. I'm doing all of that in Photoshop. And so one of the things that I do is I have a 10-minute Photoshop post-processing technique. If you are interested in checking it out, check out episode, I don't even know what episode it is anymore. Let's see. Go to live.bimafterdark.com, and then you'll see episode number, man, I can't believe it's that long ago. Wild. From May 8th. It's called Photoshop for Architects. I don't even know what episode it was at that time, but I'll post the link right here for you guys. So I went deep into the process that I use there. But what I wanted to show you in this quick video here is just how that post-processing affects the original image. So you'll see I'll turn off the post-processing completely without the background image there. So turning the background image on still looks pretty good, but notice the difference between post-processing. So it's subtle. It's mostly color corrections and stuff like that. But I'm going to go through each layer here. So you'll see I do hue and saturation, brightness, contrast, curves, levels. I added the smoke in there. I do a little technique where I can add some distance fog. I have a technique where you enhance the shadows and the highlights using alpha channels, which again I do in my Photoshop class. And then I use what's called Camera Raw Filter, which is the coolest freaking thing in Photoshop ever. So definitely do that. It makes a huge difference, as you saw, and I think it's just going to complete it there. Makes a huge difference, and whatever you do from now on is make sure that whenever you create an export from Revit, whether it's a rendering, whether it's exporting to something else, just do me a favor and make sure that you always spend a little time in Photoshop or GIMP or some kind of photo editor, okay? Step 4, okay? Now when it comes to renderings, step 4, do yourself a favor and look into real-time rendering programs. If you are still rendering using the damn teapot in Revit, stop it. You just don't need to be there anymore, okay? The programs that are out there now are so good, and the quality is equivalent, if not better, than what's coming out of the native Revit. Don't even spend time there, okay? So check out the programs. I'm going to run through a few of them, and I've obviously gone through a bunch of them in the last 6 months here on this show. But real-time rendering is changing the way we render things, okay? I don't even believe that rendering really... I can't remember the last time... Actually, that 2015 project was probably the last time that I actually used the native Revit rendering engine. So, first one that I'm going to talk about quickly is Enscape. I did an entire episode on Enscape. Here's some renderings of a office renovation recently for COVID. You can see some of the glass and stuff like that. But just to show you, nice thing about Enscape is that it sits on top of Revit. And the lighting for interiors and stuff like that, this is no post-processing, this image you see here. This is just straight out of Enscape. The lighting looks phenomenal for interiors. This is a little warm. I know some people don't like it this warm, but this is basically just opening up Enscape in my Revit view and pumping out here. Notice custom materials. Notice the floor has custom materials. The walls even have some custom materials. The curtain, etc. So. And as I mentioned before, Enscape sits directly on top of Revit. So I think I did a couple episodes ago, I did Enscape comparing to Twinmotion for a healthcare project. So if you want to check that out, it's pretty cool. But this is just showing you the quality of what you can create just using out-of-the-box Enscape with Revit stuff, which is pretty sweet. What that looks like live if you're not making renderings. So just to give you a sense of the quality of what you see without any post-processing. So in Enscape, you still are going to want to do your typical Revit materials, though, as if you were making a rendering in native Revit. So you're still going to want to do the textures, you're still going to want to do the bump maps, and you can even start looking into reflection maps and all that good stuff, okay? Lumion, another one. And again, one of the greatest things, this is where you kind of, Enscape is getting there, they're starting to build a library, but one of the great things about Lumion and Twinmotion, which are the next two I'm going to show, is that you can build your entire world, right? So here's the rendering. This is one of the final renderings, but the scene looks like this, right? So I built this world, and then I'm just taking pictures of this world. And that's what's really cool, is you don't have that part of the post-processing where you're putting it in and trying to match it with the photo and all that crazy stuff. You can make images, and all your Photoshop and post-processing process is really just color correction, okay? Another example. One of the things when you're using Lumion as opposed to Twinmotion or Enscape is Lumion relies on some heavy duty what are called effects. And so effects are kind of like Lumion's way of post-processing before they're processed or something like that. Lumion does a little bit of ray tracing. It's not full true real time in my eyes. So here's what you see with this is a typical Lumion view camera image without any effects applied. And this is one with effects applied. And this is before photoshopping. So you can see this is a pretty cool rendering. So some of the effects I use for that scene, I'm going to show you here, are here's that building, here's that little scene. I'm just going to run through it a little bit. I'm going to jump into my cameras, and you can see depth of field is one, chromatic aberrations, shadows, skylight. So those are all a bunch of different random things for Lumion. Then I'm turning on a thing called hyperlight, which is just like global illumination, increasing reflection, changing the color correction, changing the exposure, adding some sharpness, modifying the sun so it's nighttime, modifying the sky, adding 2-point perspective, adding some fog, adding some more fog, and then adding some lens flare. And now you'll notice, just by adding those series of effects, what's coming out of Lumion is almost picture perfect. You barely need to post-process it. So super cool, super powerful. And notice I don't need to do a single thing about the trees, etc., etc. So if you're interested in this piece of it, I do have part of my BIM Can Be Sexy course, which is within the community that I mentioned before. I have this entire process mapped out in a course for Lumion and this sample file and all that good stuff. So again, if you're interested in that, check out community.bimafterdark.com. And then the last real-time rendering program you should definitely look into is Twinmotion, which I've been getting into more. And here again is the final rendering. Remember the trees, the plants, the cars, people, all those things you don't have to Photoshop in, which is one of the coolest parts about it, right? The scene itself looks something like this. And you can see there's my live model. All the trees are already there. The lighting, the fog, the ambiance, everything is already there. And so there's my model, me moving around live. Okay. Huge advantage. Definitely, if you have not tried any of these real-time softwares, definitely jump into them and try them out. They are game changers as far as I'm concerned, and they will dramatically improve. And so, sort of taking it to the next level, where I think that these programs are going to help us is, remember I said in the very beginning that I think we're marching our way towards model-based construction documents per se. And so what we're doing actually now at Turner is we're creating full live model logistics plans. So we're actually showing clients, our subcontractors, and our team how we're going to build their buildings live now. And that's where these real-time programs come into play. Okay, you have the ability now. Remember, those renderings and those videos, those are just snapshots of our scene. So why not give people access to the entire scene? Okay, pretty cool, pretty powerful, pretty sweet. And definitely something you guys should look into. So, before I recap, I saw a couple comments and questions coming in, which is awesome. Enscape is the lightest, best renderer by far. Lumion and Twinmotion, the distance between speed and quality. Junior just mentioned he thinks Enscape is the lightest, best renderer by far. Thanks for the comment, dude. Yeah, I've gone through exhaustively comparing the three. Just check out past episodes, but I just wanted to show all three of them here because when it comes to presentation graphics and making Revit sexier, for example, if you have not tried a real-time rendering program, you need to. If you're still clicking the teapot in Revit, you need to stop yourself right now and check out these programs. Niku is asking about the Lumion Global Illumination on the interior scenes. And yes, that is where I think Enscape shines versus Twinmotion. And Lumion right now is the interior scenes. It takes quite a bit of effort and tweaking to get a scene to look really, really nice lighting-wise in those programs. Whereas in Enscape, as I mentioned, the stuff is basically done there. Sammy asked, where did I get these surrounding buildings? Depends. Some of them are part of the program. Some of them we model as just generic models in Revit, and some of them are from OpenStreetMaps and other open sources. So depending on where your project is and what you need to do, you're going to want to look into that. Usually what we do for those more urban environments is we're modeling a block or two nearby, because then we can add the detail, the scale, and level we want, and the rest of it we're using things like OpenStreetMap and stuff like that. Scoured mentioned that Enscape seems to be the easiest to get into. Enscape is the easiest to get into because you're not modeling or building scenes within Enscape, right? All you're doing is navigating, and you're using Revit. So yes, if you know how to make a rendering using the teapot in Revit right now, then you know how to use Enscape. So hopefully that's helpful for you guys there. My hand's so small there. How steep is the learning curve on the real-time rendering programs? Honestly, it's not that bad. I would say if I had to rate them as far as easiest to hardest, Enscape's the easiest, Twinmotion's the second middle, and then Lumion's the hardest. And that's really just based out of intuitiveness of the UI and the software itself. But the reality is they're not difficult to use. I promise you that. The whole point of them is that they're easy to use UIs, right? So if you're worried about that, I would say going into those two for sure. So Robert just asked, are the trees and landscape generated by the renderer and they must be added in Revit? Good point. So no, depending on which program you're using, if you're using Enscape, then yes, those objects need to be in Revit somehow, and they need to exist in the Enscape library. If you're using Twinmotion and Lumion, you're building your building and the surrounding landscape usually, and then you're placing the vegetation, the people, the cars, the grass, all that stuff. You're building that scene around your Revit model within those programs. I have, if you check out a couple episodes ago, my Twinmotion I should just link it here for you guys. I took someone's model that they sent me, a user, and I went through the entire process of creating a scene in Twinmotion. So I'll post that right now in the chat. I'll also post it in the description after this guy is live or done being live. Twinmotion, let's see. Somebody mentioned it's easier in 3ds Max. Yes. I've got nothing against 3ds Max. If you guys are users of it and you're good users of it, and then power to you. But yes, learning 3ds Max is like learning Revit, as opposed to Twinmotion and Lumion and Enscape are really just learning how to navigate a program and a couple little buttons, honestly. So, all right. I saw something else. John went back to CDs about large-scale details. Are you doing anything, or just old-school detailing? It depends. Honestly, I don't have an example open right now, and I don't want to try and open it live because God only knows what I would pull up. But on some of the residential stuff I've done, I actually will do, I do a typical wall section because, again, it's just kind of the nature of how we do things right now, right? But I usually do an axon section, boxed wall section next to it to try and show that detail a little better, things that don't make sense. Some things just make more sense as sort of that axonometric view. And so, and then as far as the presentation wise of it, if you wanted to try some of these techniques, you can. Definitely line thicknesses are important there. But usually once you get that 3D detail next to it, that's very helpful too. Can you render elevations and floor plans in Lumion? You can, but they're perspective. So they're not true orthographic views. In Enscape, you do have an orthographic view now, which is pretty cool looking. And there's somewhat of one in Twinmotion. In Lumion, there's no orthographic view. It's only 3D. So you could do an elevation, but it'd still be a perspective view. Do I have a video on custom materials? Yes, I think I have a video on custom materials. If I don't have a full video on custom materials, it's definitely, I do have an entire section on it in the community. So actually, with that being said, let me just recap. So we went through my journey. We talked about why it's important. Adding depth and shadow is step 1. Using custom materials is step 2. Always post-processing is step 3. And step 4 is getting into and utilizing real-time rendering programs. It's a must, and you guys should all dig into it. So I know there was a couple people that were asking, you've been asking about more content and if you wanted to explore more on some of this. So right now, I did open the community publicly. It was beta before. And so this is actually what it looks like. It's the BIM After Dark community. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that I do have full-length courses within this community. And one of the courses is BIM Can Be Sexy. So if you look at that course, I go into extreme depth into all of the things I just talked about. So you can see the 70-50-20 rule is actually right here. There's a video on it. And then I go floor plans. I go through all the settings and setups for floor plans. I talk about elevations, sections, diagrams, renderings, Photoshop. Then I have Lumion, Enscape, and Twinmotion, an entire section for them with sample files. So the reason I bring that up is some of the stuff may be free around the blog somewhere if you keep searching, and I'll try and find the links for the description. But if you really want to dig into this stuff and you enjoyed this content, be sure to check it out. It's at community.bimafterdark.com. It's reasonably priced, and you have access to all of my courses, including access to me, office hours, etc. So definitely check that out if you're interested. I urge you guys. So I'm going to dig through some more questions here. Where'd my camera go? Camera only. Hey, there we are. TM and Enscape does that with ease, with ortho views. Yep. Do you have any setting recommendations for using sketchy lines percentage-wise? No. I have to be honest with you. The sketchy lines... I'm sorry, that was kind of... The sketchy lines in Revit are kind of crummy in my opinion. I've been utilizing some cool programs. If you really are interested in making sketchy stuff, I honestly would suggest you do, which I actually do talk about this in the course as well. But if you check out a program called FotoSketcher, let me see, am I sharing my screen now? I am. FotoSketcher, and I'll put a link to this. Awesome free open source program that does some really cool. Make it subtle, you don't have to go crazy, but a lot of those effects that you saw in those images in the very beginning, those are using this program. There are some that extend lines and some that don't, but if you're really looking into making an image that has a really cool sketch effect and extended line, check out my Photoshop live session from a few weeks back, which I posted here, and I'll link below. I think I showed some Photoshop actions that do it. I think they just look so much better than the Revit ones. I'm not convinced, honestly, of the Revit, what's it called, FotoSketcher thing. Jean Paul just asked if I could tell you guys a little bit about the Dynamo course. So I haven't talked about Dynamo in a little while here, and actually, believe it or not, next week we are going to show a little Dynamo, and I will get back into it a little bit. I'll do even better. I'll actually just pull up the Dynamo course for you. So the Dynamo course is DIY Dynamo, and so it's about 2 or 3 years old now. Part of the reason why I wanted to do this this community is that I could update content and interact with you guys while you go through the content. But the whole point of DIY Dynamo is to get you into Dynamo. So if you wanted to learn it, you have no idea what it is, you want to get started, you're a beginner, etc. The program is set up directly for that. We do get into more complex things as we get to the end, like duplicating views and renaming them and cool stuff like that. But you'll notice I go through some simple examples all the way down to more complex, but it's really teaching you the foundations and giving you an understanding. There's been over 220 people who've gone through the course so far, and everyone has come out of it being able to write their own scripts, or at least start writing their own scripts, which is huge, right? Here's the content here. I think if you go to the community.bimafterdark.com, there's a video outline as well. So be sure to check that out if you're interested in that. And we do actually have next week we'll be doing. Actually, next week is a cool crossover event with another group and Paul Aubin, and Conrad Sovin is actually going to be presenting. Who, for those of you who do know Dynamo, he's the one who created the Archie Labs and a few other packages for Dynamo. So. Lee Fang, hey, thanks for joining us live, Lee. I think Lee always misses it live and always messages me after the fact. Thanks for joining us live. So any chance to have one session for Enscape? Believe this week. Yeah, I'm always willing to take suggestions for possible live sessions. So either do them in the chat here or shoot me an email, jeff@therevitKid.com. There's actually Enscape has a 2.8 is coming out soon, and there's going to be some big changes there. So we'll definitely start talking to that. Clay asked if we could do a happy hour on Navis and Synchro, and Solibri. So it sounds like you want to get into some construction programs. I did have a session from a few weeks back about construction and BIM and construction, which is awesome. So check that one out. And Jeff Davis asks, is there's a cost? Yes, there's a cost to access the course. Right now it is at $39 a month to access the entire community. So I showed the courses, but there's more than just the courses that you become a member of. You'll get all 4 courses, which are 4 full length. It's I don't even know how many hours of content, but we do have office hours as well. So I do live office hours where it's a video conference with you guys, the members, privately, and we ask questions in chat. There's also a community feed, so it's kind of like social media, but with just the community. And so you can see there's people asking questions, there's comments, there's suggestions, etc. And so all of that. The other thing I didn't mention is, as a member of the community, you do also get sample files from all of my tutorials on the blog. So if, for example, if you happen to catch the episode on design options last week, so this is the episode on, I'm not even sharing my screen. Sorry, guys. Darn it. So what I was showing you before was actually, here's the feed with all the content, which can be set up by topics. So if you want to look at presentation topics, you can see here's all the topics that members have posted about, or myself asking about certain things. There's conversations about those topics, sample files, etc. The other thing is, what I was mentioning too, is if you haven't noticed on the blog, if you head over to revitkid.com, at the bottom of tutorial posts now, there's this little link that says download the sample files. So for example, if you enjoyed my design options session from last week, if you are a member, you click here, it goes right to the post, and you can download the sample files from that tutorial. So if you like the tutorial from the blog from however many years ago, etc., the sample files are existent for you to download, which is cool, a little member perk. And as I mentioned, office hours are also every other week right now. I'm holding them. Maybe it's going to be more or less. I'm not really sure. But so far we've had 7 of them, and it's usually there's 8 or 9 of us. On Tuesday of last week, I actually streamed the office hour live. If you're interested, to check it out. Okay. You love the construction happy hour? Awesome, dude. All right. So thank you all for sticking around. Again, make sure you subscribe below. Oh, one other thing I meant to mention, which not a lot of people know about, is I do have a bunch of free content and resources, ebooks and stuff like that you can check out if you go to free.bimafterdark.com. And I'll also post that here. And part of that is I do have the complete Twinmotion course. Or section of the course from the community. I have I have it accessible for free. Just sign up through email, and you'll get an email every day of different the course content for Twinmotion. So free.bimafterdark.com. All right, I think that's it. Looks like questions are dying down. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. This was pretty cool. Something different. Hopefully this was valuable to you guys. Next week, look out, Thursday this time. I think actually next week it's going to be at 7 o'clock, not 7:30. So if you want to join live, just keep an eye out for emails and subscription. We're going to be talking some really cool stuff. And there's a lot of cool stuff planned. So with that, everyone be safe. Please wear a mask. I know it's crazy, but I have to say it. And stay healthy. With that, I'm going to sign off. I'll talk to everyone later. Feel free to reach out to me. TheRevitKid.com, @TheRevitKid on Twitter, or Jeff@TheRevitKid for email. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. I'll see everyone next week. All right. With that, I'm going to sign off, and I bid you all a lovely weekend.